Welcome to the Growth Over Grades podcast, a show connecting you with thought leaders, pioneers, and change agents who are leading the charge to support schools and districts in making the shift toward competency-based education and to promote growth over grades. I'm Jordan Lewis, and on the show today, we hear from author, speaker, podcaster, coach, consultant, and superintendent of Mount Olive School District in Mount Olive, Illinois, Dr. Brandi Kelly. Brandi's journey into education started with a tragedy that ignited her passion for giving and sent her on a mission with purposeful direction. To work in a world where hope can be delivered and inspiration can be drawn from trauma. With over 20 years in education, Brandi works to empower students and staff to believe and then achieve, allowing for a nurturing learning environment to thrive where students are eager to learn, are connected to their school community, and strive for excellence. Today, we go deep into Brandi's insights on resilience and the importance of community and culture in support of education as we unpack her leadership framework centered on hope. We chat about her upcoming book titled Lead with Hope and strategies every leader can take away to bring about positive change within their school district today. Now, to my conversation with Dr. Brandi Kelly. Brandi, we're so lucky to have you on the show today, and I personally am really excited to learn from you. Not only because I know you're doing a lot of amazing work in education, but because today we're focused on an inspiring topic, hope. We're focused on hope here today, but more specifically, leading with hope. So Brandi, thank you so much for spending some time with us.
Well, thank you for having me, Jordan. It's a pleasure to be here today.
So let's kick things off on a hopeful note. Talk to us, Brandi, a little bit, like why hope? What's inspired you to make this the central theme of your work?
Sure. Well, I can't really answer that question without giving you a little bit of my origin story. So when I was 15, my brother Brandon drowned. It was a rainy Saturday in May, and he and my little brother went on a horseback ride, and they didn't come home. It was my first prom. The very next day was Mother's Day, and it was one of the hardest times in my life. Brandon's body was discovered on a Monday afternoon, and of course that forever changed our family. But through this tragedy emerged goodness. So our community, they really rallied around us. And some of the most incredible memories that I have are of Brandon's classmates. They call themselves the 95ers. But just that school community and the community at large really rallied around our family, and they turned what was a real difficult time in our life into an opportunity to see the goodness in humankind. And so that experience caused me to pursue education as a profession. I knew I wanted to give back. I wanted to help others navigate those same kinds of hardships. And many years later, I've been in education for over 20 years now. I developed the HOPE acronym. And HOPE for me stands for habits, optimistic outlook, passion, purpose, and perseverance. And then, of course, excellence. And that framework, the system of hope, it really did spark hope in myself. And I am working diligently to utilize that framework to also spark hope in other people.
And I know as you were kind of outlining that acronym, which we're going to unpack here in a moment, I just wanted to say, first of all, thank you for sharing your story. It's a really impactful story. And throughout the duration of just hosting this show, I've had the opportunity to talk to a lot of different educators, but your story rings very unique in the reasons you got into education to give back. And I appreciate that story quite a lot. But talk to us and let's unpack that acronym a little bit further. I'm curious, what this kind of means to you and how you're seeing this acronym shape your approach to leadership, but also to personal development.
Yeah. So, it's been through time, through self-reflection, through intentional efforts to get to know myself better. There's a saying that you have to lead yourself well before you can lead others well. And I believe that with my whole heart. And through my journey from school social worker to principal to now superintendent, I have seen that unfold. And that intentional practice of self-reflection helps you to get to know yourself better, build your own self-efficacy, and then it helps you to grow leaders and build culture in your organization, in your school district, whatever. And for me, that is really what the system of hope is all about, is growing leaders and building that capacity, building that community, building that culture so that our students can realize their full potential.
So if you were to, and we'll kind of use the example, let's say I'm a school leader and you're going to start coaching me on the acronym itself. Talk to me first about habits. What sort of habits can this help us to establish?
Yeah. So the first thing I would do, Jordan, actually, is I have kind of invented a survey, an assessment, if you will, and it's based off of Albert Bandura's self-efficacy scale, but it is specific to the HOPE system. And so that's the first thing I would do. I would have my client do that assessment so that I can see what the areas of strength and weakness are. And I am unique in that I'm not going to focus on the weaknesses. We're not going to ignore them, but rather we're going to focus on a strengths-based perspective, because I believe that what you focus on is what you grow. And so looking at the strengths in that inventory and that assessment is going to help us to identify what are the goals that you want to achieve and kind of break it up in quarters, across the year. What are the goals you want to achieve around habits? And is that spiritual? Is that emotional? Is that physical? We have to look at the whole person in terms of habits and really unpack that assessment, look at what it is you want to achieve. And then I would help them to create a vision board so that they can see it. If you can see it, you can be it. And I think that it takes that intentional effort, that clarity, and that focus in order to maximize the system of hope through that intentional practice of self-reflection.
And it's interesting hearing you talk about the strengths first focus. Mm-hmm. I know that it's very common for leaders to look at, through self-reflection, what they're good at and say, okay, I'm good at that. I'm going to not work on that any longer. I'm going to just focus on how I can get better. I recently read a book called The Savvy EdTech Leader, and it was written by Cheryl Absher. And it's a direct correlation, Brandi, to what you're talking about, where they were talking about establishing lead teams of leaders and how, hey, it's great, but if you have strengths, do what you're good at. Be passionate about what you're good at and assemble folks around you who can help make up where your weaknesses might lie. And it's a burnout strategy, because otherwise you're just going to be very burnt out if you're trying to not only do what you're good at, but also improve what you're not as good at.
Absolutely. And another book that I am rereading right now is called The Working Genius by Patrick Lencioni. And he has an assessment as well. And he calls it your working genius, your working competency, and your working frustration. And if we spend too much time in that area of frustration, we are going to burn out, and we're not going to be fueling our purpose and our passion. And that's where the P comes in for me with the system of hope. If you are achieving your purpose, but doing it through your passion projects, the areas that you're super passionate about, you are going to be much more fulfilled and purposeful in your work. If you're constantly working in your area of frustration, you're going to lead to burnout.
It is such a challenge. And I'm curious what your perspective might be when you're working with individuals as they're going through those initial stages of the assessment, because it's challenging to be vulnerable with yourself, to actually admit what those weaknesses are. And I feel like it's very easy. And whenever I've done assessments like this, to say, okay, I might not be good at this, or I kind of lie to myself a little bit about what my true weaknesses actually are. So I'm curious as to how you support leaders in being vulnerable enough to actually get value from that.
You go with their speed. I mean, you have to meet them where they're at. And that's where my social work background really comes into play here. I do believe you have to meet people where they're at, and they will go as fast as they can tolerate. But I do encourage them to be vulnerable. I encourage them consistently to be honest, at least with themselves, because when you think about growing yourself as a leader, your biggest obstacle is oftentimes the person looking back at you in the mirror. You have blind spots. You have those vulnerabilities. You have triggers, and you have to get real with yourself and understand what motivates you to do what it is that you're doing. And it's only then that you're going to be able to reach your fullest potential. But it does take time, and it takes consistent effort. And you can't push too hard. You have to go at the speed that the individual, the growing leader, is able to tolerate. But, oftentimes I have heard throughout my career that pain is often the reason that people change. And so we can either wait until we hit that block or hit that wall, that pain point, or we can consistently and intentionally, through self-reflection and self-awareness, take this journey proactively. And that's what I prefer to do.
Sure. Now, connecting the dots, as we've chatted a bit about the habits, the purpose, perseverance, the outlook, then how does this all come together to lead to excellence?
Yeah, excellence is defined in my mind as just getting better one day at a time. It isn't me getting better than Jordan or me getting better than somebody else. It is me bringing my best self and showing up and showing out every single day. And so it's just that consistency of getting better each and every day. And so that to me is excellence. It's a continuous cycle of improvement, to use an educational term in defining excellence. But it's just consistency and showing up and showing out and just getting better day after day after day.
And I think you made a really important call out that it's not about comparing to others. It's about, excuse me, it's about just those micro actions that lead to the consistency over time. I feel it's really easy to do that comparison, whether it's amongst your staff, your colleagues, the mentors whom you might look up to. And I think the way you're approaching excellence is actionable for the leaders.
Yeah, and it's just about becoming. None of us have arrived. We are all at different stages of the game, of the journey, and it's just consistency in our organization, our school district, the admin team. We talk about progress over perfection. That's what we're striving for, is just consistent progress, and over time, that is excellence.
Now, I'm curious at this stage, as you're working with leaders, it's one thing for the leader themselves to embrace this model and aim to become better. But we know that a lot of what leaders are looking to do is, through getting better themselves, they're looking to empower those around them to also become better leaders collectively. So before we start talking about strategies, what sort of barriers do you see leaders facing when they're trying to cultivate this notion of hope in their schools or across their district?
Yeah, I think the biggest obstacle is kind of what I alluded to earlier in the blind spots or the triggers, or oftentimes it's things that have happened in our background. It may be a trauma or a tragedy and adversity, but more often than not, when I'm working with individuals, that part of their personality where they want to please others, being a people pleaser. Many of us are hopefully recovering people pleasers. But I think that is one of the biggest obstacles that we face, is that we're working not to achieve that excellence, that I'm looking at myself and I'm getting better day after day, but, well, what would Jordan think about this? Or what would Sally down the hall think about this? And, oftentimes we're worried about what people think about what we say or do. And we wouldn't even go to that person for advice if we needed advice on a subject. But we're letting a narrative get into our head that really does create obstacles for us. And so just getting out of our heads, just not being people pleasers. And I know it's easier said than done, but that's where the habits come into play again. You go back to that and you look at ways, what are small steps, what are intentional actions you can take to build the strategies so that when you start going down that avenue, that you're able to employ some thought stopping techniques, for instance, or, use some affirmations. There's a lot of strategies out there that you can employ to stop that self-sabotage and put yourself back on a very positive track.
The idea of the self-sabotage, I feel like, is one of those things that at some point in everybody's career, they've had that. And as you were sharing that story, Brandi, I was just, really kind of mindful of how many times something has come across my desk. And before I look at a solution, I think of the 15 problems that would be the barrier for me to actually tackle that. And I feel like that's a really common thing that happens. But you mentioned thought stopping techniques or affirmations. I'm hoping you can expand a little bit on that, because if anybody's going to take something away, I feel like this is a great starting place.
Yeah. And again, I started out in education as a school social worker. And then through my journey, I've also become a licensed clinical social worker. So that's cognitive behavioral therapy techniques right there. And it's just employing a strategy where you feel yourself going down a negative lane, if you will. And for kids that I've worked with over the years, I've asked them to just visualize a stop sign. You know that this is not productive. You know that this is not producing positive outcomes. Visualize a stop sign and just stop that thought, that track of thinking. And it may even require you to reset or change the channel. You may need to do something else in order to stop that thought and go to a positive. And that's why I mentioned affirmations. I love quotes. I love scriptures. And so some people put a positive quote or a scripture or something, a compliment maybe, that somebody has given them over the years. And they put that somewhere where they can see that when they need to employ that thought stopping technique. And that helps them to change the channel in their brain. And it's just as simple as that, but it's very powerful in creating a space where you can change the channel, you can stop the negative thinking and replace it with positive thinking.
It makes me think of a strategy I saw recently where an individual had used AI and they said, generate me, whether it's 200, 300 positive affirmations. They printed those off. They spent all of 15 minutes cutting those into strips. I know that seems kind of daunting when I say the word 200, but go to your library. You know that they have those. I don't even know what they're called. You can imagine the big slicer machines. Yeah. I don't know what they're called. Yeah. You can imagine it. We're talking visuals here, folks. And put those in a jar. Because whenever then you're having that thought, you can easily access a positive affirmation to help you reset. It also makes me really think, Brandi, about journaling and what that can provide to a leader, whether it's journaling through the challenge and stopping there just to get it out, or an even broader strategy of being able to come back to those in times where you need reassurance of how you're actually methodically moving through some of these problems.
Absolutely. And, I, whenever I was a school social worker, somebody along the way shared this strategy with me. And they said, anytime somebody gives you a thank you card or a student creates a piece of art for you, create a file and keep it all in that file. And then when you're having a bad day, pull that out and reflect on the impact that you're making. Because in everybody's respective ways, we're making a difference in this world. If you're putting out that positive energy, I believe in the law of attraction, it's going to come back to you. And that's a really powerful way of providing an opportunity for yourself on a bad day to pull out a file that shows I really am making a difference. My work matters.
I'm wondering, and I'm curious if in your experience you've had any conversations or a focus just on developing a support network, whether it's in the building or outside of the building, because being a leader, especially when you're a superintendent, can be isolating. So I'm curious as to what that conversation looks like.
Yeah, so within our school district, we have professional learning communities. So our teachers work together in grade level bands. Our pre-K 2 teachers are 3-5, our 6-8, our 9-12. And that's more focused on instructional strategies. The administrative team, we're a support network for each other. But even beyond that, Jordan, there's a number, especially with technology, there's a number of ways that you can connect. And through organizations like Teach Better or the Illinois Association of School Administrators, even my side business, the Spark H.O.P.E. EDU, we provide spaces for individuals to come together to share what they're doing, share the greatness that they're putting out into the world. Thought partners. I think we all need thought partners.
Yeah.
And we need people to call us on our crap, but also encourage us on the dark days. And we're going to have those. But I think creating communities is such a powerful way to help everybody reach their fullest potential.
And the idea of having accountability partners, I think it is incredibly important. Now, we're recording this right after the new year, so the idea of an accountability partner rings very, very true as people are entering the new year with the resolutions. And the stat is astronomically high of how many people back off of their resolutions within the first month of the year. But this is the time, as you're listening into this episode, whether it is in January, February, March, it doesn't matter, to take that pause and think, who can I allocate to be my accountability buddy? And Brandi, we could do something really cool here, and we can always say, hey, if you're looking for an accountability buddy, comment on this episode and we'll work to find you somebody who can help you be accountable, because I feel like that's such an asset, both for those good days but those bad days as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Accountability is huge. And again, it's about that idea of excellence, just getting better. It's not about, and I call it supportive accountability, Jordan, because we can be held accountable in love. And I think that's the key right there. And when we truly are trying to help somebody reach actualization, if I can say that word, if we're truly trying to help them to be their best self, that's what it is. It's supportive accountability.
And it's so funny that in a professional setting, I feel people are almost scared of that. You're going to go to your best friend and you want them to be able to tell you the good and the bad. But why in a professional setting are we scared of that?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think it has to do with the evaluative component of somebody critiquing you, or, in the educational space, they say that you have to live at least 30 minutes away from the school that you work in order to be an expert. I think that's so wrong. I think we have it so wrong, because we have so many experts, so many rich resources in our school community, but because of that idea of comparison, we rob ourselves of the gift of accountability. And I think if we could just change our mindset on that and have that abundance mindset and share our strengths as we're helping each other to reach that idea of excellence, we would be much better off for it.
I couldn't agree more with all those aspects. And now I think I have some work to do personally after this recording to really get my accountability buddy together, because I did the classic, wrote out all my goals for the year, and I'm saying it live on the show. 2025 is the year that I actually follow through on those. And I'm going to be finding that accountability buddy to help me out on that. Yeah. But Brandi, I'm thinking now a bit bigger scale. We've got leaders listening in. They understand the acronym of HOPE, and they're looking to now say, how do I bring this into a more concrete strategy so I can drive some meaningful change in my district. Talk to us a little bit about how they can take that next step forward.
Yeah. A very simple step that they could take is just go visit my website, sparkhopeedu.com. And you will go to my blog and you will find a 4-part series called A Culture of Hope through habits, optimistic outlook, passion, purpose, perseverance, and excellence. And that series is going to help you to start on that journey. If individuals want to do a deeper dive for their organization specifically to build that culture, I do a cultural assessment. And what I do is I can do a 1 or a 2-day assessment. And it's a deep dive where I talk to all of the stakeholders in the organization in sessions. I do classroom observations, and then I provide strengths, I provide themes, and I provide recommendations that are specifically tailored to your organization. And that is such a powerful product that you receive at the end in a report. And for me and for my school district that I'm currently serving in, it really did start us on an amazing growth journey. I did that in year 1 at my district. And I brought in, I think, PJ Capozzi. I brought in PJ.
He was on the show a couple weeks ago.
Yes, I brought PJ in, and he's the one that got me started with the cultural assessment. And it really did set us on that growth journey where after a year of just focusing on culture, all of our achievement scores on the Illinois Assessment of Readiness raised by about 20% or more. And that's huge because at that point, we hadn't even started working on instructional strategies. We were just focusing on culture. So it really does show, it puts a fine point on the fact that culture is so incredibly important, and having a healthy culture makes all the difference.
Now, what sort of changes did you see around culture as you went down that road?
A lot of it, Jordan, goes back to that accountability piece. One of the themes that came out in that cultural assessment was my predecessor. There was a lot of sweeping under the rug is kind of the phrase that was used. And so what individuals were asking for, in a way, was accountability. Now, it's a little harder to stomach at times than it is for some at sometimes than others. But at the end of the day, that's what they want. They want to know where the boundaries are. They want to know where the guardrails are. And so as we started putting things in place, norms, expectations, talking about our mission and our vision, setting up accountability standards, people have really risen to the challenge. And I believe communication has improved and culture has definitely improved.
And it's a really great segue because we've spoken a bit about vulnerability and how that plays into leadership and how you need to be in that vulnerable state to start going through and identifying those strengths that you're going to work through. But I'm curious, when we start thinking about this in a broader sense, how can leaders show strength and authenticity, but also vulnerability when they're communicating this work out to the teams?
I think it boils back down to honesty. We're all human. At the end of the day, we're more alike than we are different. And I think that whenever we talk about what it is that we're struggling with and we show up as our authentic selves, people respect that. I think they want that. I think that's how we are able to create that sense of community, that sense of belonging and connection. And if I can, Jordan, I'd like to share a story about a former student of mine. In my book, I talk about a student, and I've changed names for privacy reasons, and I'll call her Reagan. But Reagan was a junior high student, and she was assigned to me, and I was her counselor. And when I showed up, Reagan didn't want to talk to a counselor. And as a matter of fact, she said to me, I've talked to a number of counselors in my life. Nobody's helped. You'll be no different. And I probably met with Reagan 3, maybe 4 times before she even started to open up and talk to me. But do you know what I attribute that to? I attribute it to the fact that I shared with Reagan, I know right now, Reagan, you don't have hope for your future, but I'm going to hold hope for you. Some people are afraid to hope. Some people are afraid of change, and they're afraid of doing things different because they don't know what the outcome's going to look like. But when you, as the leader, set that vision and you keep showing up and you are consistent, people want to follow a person with purpose and passion and hope. And for my student, for Reagan, that's what I did for her. And I think as a superintendent now, that's what I'm doing for my organization and the people that I lead.
Now, I got to know the ending. So what happened with Reagan?
So Reagan was a child who, she lived with her grandma. Her mom was a drug addict, and Reagan went down a really rough road. She went to an alternative school. She went to a residential school. She was in a hospital. And the funny thing is, Jordan, I don't know why. I think back about that time in my life, and I don't know why, but I went and visited Reagan everywhere that she was. I continued to show up in her life. And before I became a principal, this woman shows up in my office. And I'm like, can I help you? Guess who that was? It was Reagan. And she had a child. And at that moment, her child was living not with her. I can't remember if she was living with a family member or what that story was. But long story short, I'm still connected with Reagan on social media. She has 3 beautiful children. She's married. She has a business of her own. And despite all of her challenges with drugs and alcohol and all the trouble she got into as an adolescent, she's completely turned her life around. And I'm so proud that she now is a mother and a wife and a contributing member of society.
Hugely impactful story. So thank you for sharing that. But I really started thinking, as you're talking about this level of honesty that you're bringing forth and working through these challenges with your teams, I'm curious how some of this work could not get siloed, because I'm imagining as the leader, you're working with certain members, but that has to, at the end of the day, work its way down to those teachers and therefore those students. So how can a district start to move forward on these without it remaining siloed?
Right. Leadership is about building that capacity. So the goal is not for leaders to create followers. We as leaders need to create more leaders, right? And so how it doesn't get siloed is that as you're creating leaders and you're building that capacity, you're delegating tasks, you're delegating, and then you're holding people accountable. But it is a consistent effort in anything that somebody else can do, at least 80% as well as you can, you're delegating that and you're intentionally growing those leaders to really take your place eventually. You know, it's our succession plan. We need to create individuals who can step into the roles that are going to be vacant whenever we step out.
It's interesting hearing about how you connected that to a succession plan. I feel like it's almost an afterthought in many cases, as this, I almost visualize it as a triangle of workflows and things like that. And it's really interesting that is what kind of came out as that succession plan here with your group. Yeah.
And you're right, though. I mean, there are so many balls in the air, especially in our school districts, that just a few people are oftentimes doing the majority of the work in terms of human resources and succession planning, especially in small school districts, which is what I'm in. But we have to do a better job of recruiting, retaining, creating those succession plans, and building the future that we want to see, because it's all going to impact the student outcomes.
And I feel like, as you're talking about how this connects to the student outcomes, we've chatted a lot about this framework supporting a cultural shift, which led to better morale as from your team members and your teachers, led to a lot of amazing success from the state standards, et cetera, all those impactful things. You called out that it started with culture and not instructional strategy. Yeah. So as we're now making that connection to the student, how did you see this impact the instructional strategies that are happening in the district?
Mm-hmm. I think whenever individuals are working on themselves, when they are aligning themselves to our vision is to empower, believe, and achieve. And when that is consistently communicated and individuals know that our norms are to assume positive intent, to respect one another, and to be people who strive towards excellence. When that is consistently communicated and people are held accountable around the vision and the norms of the organization, they take it upon themselves to start finding ways that they can achieve excellence. Many of our educators are very type A individuals, and they want to succeed and they want to do what's right for kids. It's just innate in who they are. And so when that is communicated well, I do think that they will take it upon themselves to go 90% of the way. But as the instructional leader, which I believe that is the principal in our school districts, now it is their task to come back and to provide those resources and a clear definition of what academic excellence looks like in our organizations. And that's what we are doing this year in terms of giving the teachers the resources and the tools to, again, go back to that consistency and that clarity around what academic excellence looks like. And I expect to continue to have significant increases in our student achievement data year over year.
And it sounds like this approach is by giving them the tools and resources, you're giving teachers a little bit more freedom to do what they feel is best in their own personal strategy toward excellence, rather than telling them you must do this in this way.
Right. I think autonomy is very important. I do think there needs to be some non-negotiables, though. Classroom management. That is one of the things that our teachers right now are struggling with in terms of a lot of the behaviors that students are showing up in our schools with. Preschool and kindergartners are coming to school and they don't know how to self-regulate. So they're always looking for tools and strategies to improve on their classroom management. And obviously classroom management is a non-negotiable. Having your schedule posted, that's a non-negotiable. Another non-negotiable in our district is word walls. All of our teachers have word walls in their classrooms. We want literacy-rich classrooms. But the way they do that, the way that they operationalize that in their instruction, I think that has to be authentic, and we have to give them autonomy in order to optimize outcomes for each classroom.
Well, and I think it takes it to another step, because I often struggle with this just myself, not being in a school district, working with school districts. And I think, you're creating these processes or telling these teachers very specific things, but they're the ones with those students every day. They know what Johnny and what Sally need, and that's not coming through from a top down. So that autonomy becomes so much more impactful. And it almost flips the script, because now if teachers have the autonomy, they're able to come forward with the challenges. And now collectively as the organization, you're able to help solve those in a way that's actually going to make a difference.
Yeah. And Jordan, it goes back to culture. And when you're giving your teachers autonomy, you're saying to them, I trust you. And if I trust you, then chances are they're going to trust me. But trust is such a foundational building block in that culture piece that we have to, I think, give a certain amount of autonomy to our teachers in order to show them that we trust them.
And as this trust has been developed, how are you seeing this directly impact the student success? Like I know you guys have mentioned within your district, you're seeing some amazing gains in terms of your students' academics, but you're working with a lot of school districts. How is this impacting student success overall?
Yeah, again, I think it's just a matter of creating cultures where hope can thrive. And when the adults they have a positive mindset, they have a sense of purpose and passion, that increases the climate, it increases the morale, it increases the culture. And when adults are happy, kids are happy. Whenever adults feel fulfilled, those are the individuals that are teaching our students. So it just vicariously trickles down to our kids. And it's a powerful strategy for success.
And it just makes me think about something, as again, year end, a lot of reflection is happening amongst everybody. And something that I feel like that remains consistent is give time to fill your bucket, because when you can fill your bucket, it gives you more time and energy to, approach tasks like your job in a good way. And I just feel like when a teacher is having that autonomy to not be as stressed, they have clarity of mind, so they can approach the instruction in a little bit of a different way. And so much emphasis is happening in our system around personalizing the education for students, making it relevant, making it real world, so that they see themselves in the education that's being taught. But that takes time and energy to actually look at, especially if you're a veteran teacher who's been teaching for a really long time. And the expectation or the ask is you need to adjust your resources to be more relevant to the world of today. Yeah. So I'm just curious on kind of your opinion and how you support these ideas in classrooms.
Yeah, I think personalization is definitely something that is much more needed now than, and I think about a couple of my teachers who, this is their last year. We've got 3 teachers retiring this year. And, old school of thought is, I just have to create this lesson and teach it for, 30 times. Well, that doesn't work with our kids. That doesn't work in today's world. We are equipping our students for a different reality, a different future. And we may not even know what occupations are going to exist when our kindergartners graduate from high school. But giving the teachers the tools, that's just the first step. And then seeing where they're going to go with it. But it goes back to my system of hope, and it all boils down to their mindset. If they think they can or they can't, they're probably right. And so we have to open ourselves up to the possibilities and the potential that doing something different may provide us. We have to be open to innovation. Technology is so different today than it was whenever I was a student. And I'm sure in 20 more years, it'll be much more different, than it is today. But in my mind, Jordan, it starts with mindset and just creating that culture of hope so that our teachers have an open mind and a mindset that will allow innovation and change and possibilities.
And Brandi, you mentioned innovation and leveraging technology. And I know that as we're thinking about preparing our students for an unknown world, how do you see this impacting innovation? And do you see a shift instructionally taking place? I know a lot of districts and states, for that matter, are saying, hey, it's about the 21st century skills, the durable skills framework. Yeah. Is that something that you see happening within your district?
Yeah, I think education as we know it has to change. I do not see a reality where we are going to be able to continue with the same structure that we currently have in place. Personalization certainly is one of those options to innovate and to provide opportunities for our students to explore things that they may never otherwise know about. the pandemic really opened up technology in school districts and provided opportunities for students and teachers alike to see things that they may have never experienced before. And I think they have to experience it in order to know what's out there and to figure out what it is that they want to become. But that's going to take exploration, not only on the teacher's part, but also on the student's part. In our area, CTE is exploding right now. We have a new CTE center just adjacent to our school district that our students attend. And it's opening up a lot of different opportunities for the trades. And I think that is coming back full circle as well. But it's going to look a little different than it did when our parents went into maybe the trades, or when we were graduating high school. But that's okay, because just like AI right now, you can do a query in AI and you can have a business plan in 5 minutes.
Right.
You might need to tailor it and you might need to fine tune it, but things are changing and we need to be in line with that. And we need to provide those opportunities for our students to explore.
And some of my favorite stories that I'm hearing coming out of classrooms is when teachers are providing or creating experiences built around a student's passion or self-exploration, but connected to the curriculum in one way or another. And it just, even as I think back to memorable experiences that I had in high school years and years ago, some of the experiences that I remember the most was when I had, as a student, some of that autonomy to explore something of interest to myself. Yeah. And yes, it's connected and you follow through and you meet the outcomes. But when given that opportunity to just go as a student and explore, it makes sense to me and I'm excited about it. I want to do the work. I don't care about the grade because I care about the learning.
Well, and when it's tailored to something you're interested in, I may not be interested in Greek mythology, but if I'm able to tailor that assignment and funnel it into an area that I am passionate about, but still achieve the same outcomes that are necessary for the assignment, what difference does it make?
Mm-hmm. I also think a lot of times we get stuck in this pattern of, and we'll use that kind of Greek mythology example again. And okay, traditionally you might write a paper about X, Y, and Z tied to Greek mythology. And it might be challenging for a teacher to find a way to personalize that based on Jordan's interest, who loves hockey. How do I connect hockey to Greek mythology? I'm never going to get there. But we could also look at mediums of displaying information that I think is a layer teachers can often forget. Why do I need to write a paper when I can record a podcast and have an interview in my classroom? And it's just, it looks a little bit different, but how I'm displaying my knowledge is going to be the same.
Yeah. And we are utilizing resources. A lot of times the teacher feels like they are the one that has to do all the heavy lifting. Our students are more than qualified to do a lot of this work. And oftentimes we do not provide them with the opportunities that we could provide them with. And we try to do more of the work ourselves. And I think that's just old school old school mindset. And we need to get out of our own way and open the doors and let them explore and be open to the possibilities, be open to the ideas that may come from it. Because if students are involved with creating, with evaluating, with all of the things in the scholarly pursuits, they're going to be more engaged.
I want to just kind of take a moment and praise that the mindset change for a teacher, that you have 30 experts in front of you at any given moment, especially when we start thinking about things like AI. The students are so well versed in this, they're using it all the time. Change that narrative, lean into their expertise to help you and co-create experiences. But Brandi, I'm curious, just to kind of do a full 180 and kind of segue the conversation. I understand you're wrapping up, you're releasing a new book soon titled Lead with Hope. So talk to us all about your upcoming publication.
Yeah. So Lead with Hope is my book, and it's a system of self-efficacy. And right now, as we are recording this, I am in the editing phases with my publisher. I expect an early 2025 release. So I would say within a month or so, it should be released. And I'm really excited to get the stories out into the world. Basically, how the book is set up is it just goes through each one of the letters of my system of hope: habits, optimistic outlook, passion, purpose, perseverance, and excellence. And it starts off, every chapter starts off with a self-reflection story. I'm vulnerable in this book, and putting it out into the world does create a little bit of anxiety in me, but that's okay, because my hope is that through releasing my system of hope, it will show people that through self-reflection, the first part of each chapter, it comes full circle to self-awareness. And that's the last part of each chapter. And in the midst of that, we do talk about growing leaders. We talk about building a culture of hope through each one of the letters. And it really has provided me a cathartic release on my journey in leadership, and seeing how I have grown and evolved, and then now how I am growing other leaders in this space.
I think it's really impactful. I am excited to get a copy upon release, because I feel like there's a lot of important lessons to be learned. But I appreciate that you are starting that process of self-reflection as a catalyst to change. I think it's impactful. People will be able to hear a self-reflection. They're going to resonate with those reflections, see themselves in those stories, which is going to help them in self-reflection even further. And I think, Brandi, we're at this stage hearing about it, that there's an opportunity for a cool community to be developed. And I ask people, digest these stories. Don't be afraid to not share. We want you to share. I want to hear those self-reflections. And I think, 6 months from now, we can have a really cool community of people that are sharing their stories and empowering each other.
Yeah, I love that idea, that community piece, because again, that's full circle. That's where it came from. It came from that community back when I was 15, supporting and helping our family get through a tragedy. And I truly believe that trauma and tragedy, and many of us go through that, but it can ignite that hope. It can be a catalyst for change and transformation. And that's kind of my slogan right now. Let's spark hope together, because I believe where we can spark hope, success follows.
I love it. As we're kind of wrapping up here, Brandi, we'll say, first off, if you want to be a part of a community like this, leave a comment on this episode, and I'll make sure that we follow up with you and talk about how we can get some connection made so we can all share some of these stories. But final question, Brandi, we ask this to every guest on the show. Why do you see the power of hope being so pivotal to leaders who are leading the future of our K-12 education system and beyond?
I believe all leaders are dealers in hope. Napoleon Bonaparte said that. Leaders are dealers in hope. And if we have that positive, optimistic outlook, we can truly transform our organizations, our cultures, and the people within those cultures that we are growing. So for me, hope provides the way power and the willpower to make change happen.
Brandi, thank you for inspiring us all here today. Let's spark some hope together. Thank you for being on the show.
Thank you, Jordan. I appreciate you having me.
That was inspirational author, speaker, podcaster, coach, consultant, and superintendent, Dr. Brandi Kelly. Thanks for listening to the show, and make sure to hit the follow button on your podcast app so you never miss an episode. I'm Jordan Lewis, and you've been listening to the Growth Over Grades podcast.